Hi, Mayur. Welcome to Brands, Brews, and Banter. Thank you so much
Hey,
for doing this. And I know it's a Saturday morning, and usually it's a little too early for brews, but what are you drinking? So just take it through that.
I'm having a most likely this is a Subco coffee, but it could be some else that someone made it for me as well.
So you're a coffee person, like
I'm
one
a
of those,
coffee person,
like one
and
of
I have a
those.
sell coffee as well. So yeah, I'm better be a coffee person, but I am a coffee person.
Yeah, tell me about that, right? Tell me about the recent mandate that you've taken up, and I think it kind of made a few waves within all of the marketing publications that Mayur Hola moves here, right? Considering the illustrious work that you've done at OYO earlier, tell me about the mandate here, and I know there are a few quite interesting brands that you're looking to own and
Yeah,
operate. How does it go, and where do you come in to kind of help scale this?
yeah. So I'll sort of track back to, you know, I started in advertising, right? And I think the context is that I worked on Domino's very early in my career. I think contract way back 2003, give or take, right? Which sort of betrays my age, but yeah. And I launched alongside Nandu Narsipan at that time, who was one of my mentors, unfortunately no longer with us. I launched the 30 minutes or free campaign for Domino's at the time, right? With Paresh Rawal dancing and all of that. And much later, in my last stint with contract, which was yeah, pretty much my second last stint in advertising as well. I came back to work on Domino's and worked on it for 5 years and started working alongside Dev Amritesh, who came in. Dave had launched, Dave is a Domino's veteran. He built the Domino's brand alongside the team there. Uh, he was the CMO there, went on to be the CEO of Dunkin', got Dunkin' into the country, launched it, etc. Did all that mad work that Dunkin' was doing, including donuts that were called It's a Mistake or whatever. Yeah, stuff like that. And Dave came back to Domino's as COO, but he was very closely involved in marketing because that's his core. That's where he first started, and we sort of got along like quite well over there. And much later, when I was looking to get out of OYO, I reached out to Dave one fine day, and Dave was in the States, as a matter of fact, standing next to, as he told me at the time, a lake called Providence. And he said, "It's Providence that you called," and I'm standing in front of a lake called Providence as well. So no pun intended, but I'm getting into something now. He'd been in Compass Group, which is a corporate food services brand, right? They run canteens of or food for people like Google, for example. Google is their worldwide client. Huge, huge, huge organization. And he was coming back to consumer, so to speak, with culinary brands. And he said, we haven't really thought about someone as group CMO for this, but since you called and you seem to have like evolved in your life and look like someone I'd want to work with. And in his own words, he said someone who's a little more right brained than left brained. So I'm a little bored of working with all left brained people around me.
Yeah.
Much as they're strong in what they do, but I think it's time for this, and also with the tasks that we had, which was a pretty transformational one, at least with one brand, which is Subway, right? So yeah, we sort of hooked up again, so to speak, and the brands that we had to focus on. Number one, of course, Subway. Subway is the big one. It's what we feel is the sleeping giant. It is the most numerous QSR brand in the world by virtue of the fact that it's been a franchise operation. The stores tend to be smaller, and as such, you can open a lot more of them. And there is immense scope for scaling the brand over here. It's got great health perception, so to speak, a certain goodness about it. People seem to like it, even if not many people come to it. It has regulars who swear by it. So very very un-QSR of QSR brands in a lot of ways. People don't flirt in and out of this brand. People sort of are loyal to it, and those who don't consider it don't consider it. It's one of those brands. They have a very strong core in it. And then of course there's Lavazza. Lavazza is very strong in the premium segment. You go to any of the premium restaurants, hotels, etc. You'll probably be served Lavazza coffee, either vended from the machine or from the beans or both. And finally, of course, there's Fresh and Honest Cafe, which is again another corporate vending brand. So I think, like I said, finding synergies between Lavazza and Subway and we will soon be opening a store, a Subway store in an office complex, indeed, which will have Lavazza within it. Is a no-brainer, of course. Also allows for a bigger beverage strategy for Subway, but mainly focus on Subway and scale it and transform it while you're scaling it. Can be tricky. Is the task at hand, and here I am. Sorry, that was a long answer, but I thought it was worth explaining the context.
No, very interesting, and I think we all know, and we've seen a lot of Dave's work in kind of the entire transformation journey on Domino's. So I want to probably start on that, right? Particularly with Domino's, and tell me about the genesis of the 30 minute. Uh, I'm sure there's some tribal stories there that would be quite interesting. So if you were to go back on the Domino's and considering where you were at that point in time, what would you do differently, right? What do you think you could have bettered on the Domino's campaign? Because we know the success and we know how the brand turned around, but I'm sure there would have been something which like make either makes you cringe or makes you feel कि ये थोड़ा better होता तो ज़्यादा मजा आता.
I mean, the whole, honestly, I didn't expect it to take off, number one, in hindsight. People can say, we knew it would be amazing and all. It wasn't necessarily my kind of work. I mean, if you see some of the work that I mean, I tend to like Pan Vilas, Shok Badi Cheez Hai, which I didn't know Gilvi. I thought that I love that work. I still quote it as one of my favorites. I love work which has a certain aesthetic. I love art directors, working with them. A lot of my stuff, especially static work, print poster, whatever outdoor, it'll have a big art tilt to it. So that's very Bollywood. It's very Rara, etc., etc. And while when I worked with Nandu at the time, my thought was about this guy who'll sort of almost create hurdles to make sure the delivery guy is delayed. You know, and then Nandu was like, no, let's just simplify it. He'll just enjoy the fact that it's raining. The hurdle is already there. And yeah, it worked well, and you can't argue against something that works so well, right? I mean, the product proposition itself was, as it's called today, it had virality, so to speak, right? So most likely anything half decent done at the time for it would have worked very well. As it was supremely entertaining, and its simplicity was its strength, and it worked really well. So I guess I'd sort of thought of something maybe half a step ahead in my mind, but I think Nandu and team and the director elevated it with the whole musical aspect. India and music, Ram Banai Jodi, you can't do anything to break that. And it
Absolutely,
took
yeah.
off. The song took off. Paresh is Paresh. It was supremely fun, I guess, and did well. Hey, so yeah, I was part of that. What can I say?
But you're saying if it's a little more Bollywood for your aesthetic.
Yeah, which works for this country, so can't complain. Can we?
Cool, cool. So I'll probably talk a little bit more, and I want to come back to Subway at some point because
Sure.
I'm sure there's a brand challenge there, and considering there's also the weight of history on that
Yeah.
brand, and there's also a certain legacy that the brand has among Indian consumers, and I'm sure there's
Hmm.
a and to change the hull of a ship without toppling it over is
Yeah.
not something as easy. So I would want to double click on that, but before that, just take me through some of the other very cool work in contract and all some of the great clients and some of the stinky clients, right? Especially the ones which with silly briefs and sillier timelines.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I just think that number one, I like working with people in general. Like I think whoever I am and whatever I am is because of what I learned by observing people, both right and wrong, right? So yeah, I've seen enough people throw work or people under the bus and realize that's not what you should do. But equally, I've worked with some great people. Like when I started by speaking of Nandu, I speak of Ashish Chakravarti, who's now, of course, heading creative for McCann India. Uh, strategic planners like Jitinder Dabas, again at McCann India. Coincidentally, Jitu and I started way back at Grey when we both had I had more dark hair and he had more hair. Period. Uh, and I've learned from Prasun again, Ajay Gelot at Ogilvy, and so on. Neeraj Basi at Ogilvy. So many great guys, right? That also how to do the right things, right? So I think I'll speak more about the right things because what's the point of throwing people under the bus, and sort of duplicating what they already do, right?
No, we
I
will
think
talk about the not so right things as well, but I'll let you go through the right ones first.
no worries. Avinash Pant was a great guy. He's a great guy at Coke. I remember running up at Ogilvy. My first brief was on Kinley, and again, it was to take it from Boon Boon and Vishwas, which was very product, and say, can we sort of elevate it a little bit to something else, which is still Vishwas, but can perhaps go one step higher. And I remember we did something called Vishwas Karo. Also worked for the first time with Vinil as a director. I love Vinil to bits. What he brings to the table is incalculable, frankly. So it was, serendipity that I worked with some extremely good people on that project. I remember narrating the script to Avinash, and he got up and he said, I was like, okay, when people get up, either they're walking out of the room or whatever. And he said, can I hug you? And I was like, okay, this never happened, but I'll take it.
What are you saying? How much of
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is an exaggeration?
Not at all. That's how Avinash is, period. So I don't think I'm the only one who'll end up saying this for Avinash. So great guy. Worked with him on Kinley. He was managing still beverage. Avinash, the guy who would go from Gurgaon to Okla in Delhi on his cycle. He's a cyclist. He wear cycling gear and cycle to the agency to take a meeting. I don't know, 20 kilometers,
Wow.
30, whatever it was, and come back. So he'd
So
get a
that's what
ride
it
in.
takes. So
Yeah, he's insane. Still is. Swims, runs, swims, cycles all in the same day and works out. So that's Avinash for you. Crazy guy. Love him to bits. So great client. Worked with him on Kinley, worked with him. He then gave us Schweppes, very niche brands, and I love working on niche brands. Absolutely love working on niche brands. I mean, Schweppes, Burn, which was a competitor for Red Bull or trying to be. Yeah, just gave them to us to work on because we enjoyed working with each other. So that was great. People say stuff about people, clients from Korea, Japan, etc. They say they don't get stuff and all. My best clients, to be honest, were the folks from Honda, right? Um, I forget names now, but
mm,
and I don't want to get their names wrong, so I'm not going to take them. But I think the CEO at the
yeah,
time
that's fine.
and the CMO Himanshu was in India. Great people to work with. We launched Jazz together. Um, and I remember we had like some 50,000 test drives in like 30 days of campaign, etc. And that was great. It was really good to work with them. So that's another set of folks I remember. Uh, I remember the client at Godfrey Phillips, who we did Pan Vilas with. You know, Again, an ex-advertising person. I think Nita, if I'm not wrong. Again, I'm probably my age betrays me, and I'm getting names wrong now. So please forgive me. But brilliant client, just wouldn't let us settle for doing standard mouth freshener as it's called today, but standard that category advertising, pan parag advertising. She just wouldn't. And I remember Riyazat, who I was working with. Riyazat Bhai was one of my writers, and the line "Chalk Badi Cheeza" was written by him. You know, and I wrote the script for it, but I don't think I would have written that if Riyazat Bhai hadn't written "Shock Badi Cheeza." And
Yeah,
that still remains to this day one of my favorite campaigns. The Nawab, the idiosyncrasy, and again, guess who directed it? Of course, had to be Vinil. Um, you know, Insane. I remember working with Vijay Shekhar Sharma from Paytm. Not my favorite experience, to be honest.
yeah. Tell me
Uh,
about that. Yeah,
so since you said, I should talk about, but he's a good guy. He's a great guy. He's made it big, etc. And we launched, Paytm for the first time as a payment app, or a recharge app at the time. If you recall, Paytm first
yeah,
became famous
yeah,
for just recharging your mobile or your DTH, etc., etc. Right?
yeah.
Before it became big and became a payment app, and the whole demonetization thing, of course, made it bigger. So I remember working with Ayappa as the director, and then no one crazier than Ayappa. Let's be honest, okay? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
again, Ayappa is a guy. Again, I love to bits. We did Docomo together. Another
Mm,
insanely good client, by the way. I remember those guys. Such brilliant clients. Honestly, Ritesh at the time, I think Kushal was leading marketing. And the whole team over there is really good. CEO downwards was really good. So worked with Ayappa on that, then tagged up with him on Paytm, and we did this commercial which had a cat, Persian cat. And you should look it up. It's hard to describe it, but the cat manages to recharge the phone somehow. You know,
What are you saying?
yeah, it's the phone is sort of put between its legs, and then the phone recharges. And says, there's only one other way that's simpler than this, and that's Paytm. Some shit we did because he wanted to like stand out and all, and yeah, it's the last bit of work we ever did for Paytm,
But I want to
unsurprisingly.
U-turn. Like I want to U-turn back to like working
Yeah.
with Paytm, right? Like working with
Hmm.
probably Vijay and we may not want to take names, right?
Sure.
Though you have already taken one, but just tell me about some of the frustrations of working on that and probably getting the cat creative out, because I'm sure like a lot of CMOs that I get the chance to speak with, they say that whenever you're getting into a founder kind of a setup, the expectation management and sometimes there's micromanagement, like bunch of those things get very difficult to manage. So what's your thinking around that?
Yeah, I think look, broadly, founders have a very clear vision for the most part for the right here and right now, and also they're able to tell a great story. I mean, to be very honest, today, I mean, gone are the days when marketeers and creative people were the best storytellers. We are not. Founders today are the best storytellers. The whole combination of, if they happen to be, tech or whatever graduates, that whole combination of data, storytelling, vision, dream, just makes VC pants just wet, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
agree.
founders do it really well. So Vijay is no different. He's charismatic. He's visionary, has to be said. They also come along with a whole dollop of luck, which they also capitalize on, right? Um, he was very focused on the fact that he was going after Jack Ma at the time, Alibaba, and he made that happen. He got funding from there. He capitalized on that funding and made it really big. So, I mean, who am I to say anything about Vijay, right? All I can say is, in terms of communication, what can happen is they might have a vision for what they want, but perhaps that's one aspect where they're not extremely articulate, or even if they're very articulate, what they articulate is not necessarily what they actually want. That's
Hmm.
something I've seen in more
Understood.
places than
Totally
one,
understood.
frankly, right?
So there's a lot of
Ritesh
stuff lost
for
in translation.
Yeah, I mean, Ritesh is a very clear guy. Ritesh is at OYO is like I think he's 30 now or about to turn 30, but he's got a 45-year-old mind and a 30-year-old body. Like, extremely mature, extremely sure of how he wants to go about things, etc., etc. But I guess in also very clear in how he wants to go about communication, right? But there's always scope for someone to come in and say, okay, I understand you, but perhaps I know just a little bit more about communication. I understand your intent, and I think perhaps with founders it's best to align on intent and somehow find a way of getting past the preconceived notion of what the communication should be. And I think that's where you might find where the gap is. And Vijay, for instance, would say, I want to be like Apple, right? And if we see Paytm work in general around us, they built a big brand, etc. I think I highly doubt if we would equate it to Apple. So someone at some point has come and said, okay, you want to be warm, fuzzy, perhaps human, emotional. It's not necessarily Apple. Perhaps what you mean is that you want your app to at least try and look like Apple, which it doesn't. But that's a good goal to have. Uh, Perhaps in your head you want to be as big as that, and you want that aura, but really your communication is not. And here's what it needs to be. And I think that it needs a strong strategic person and then a creative person to translate that for it to happen. And I think that's where the gap you might find a lot of times with founders is. On the other hand, you have founders like Kunal, who I've only met once, so I don't know him, extremely well. But Kunal seems to have a really good sense of what his brand should be. A lot of people have plenty to say about his product, and I have honestly, again, I have no comment on it. Kunal is very successful, so what do I know that Kunal doesn't? But in general, I feel he has a great sense of it, and then he relies on a set of people to take that sense or that vibe and translate it into something cut through, and he allows for them to do that, right? He gives them that room to translate his sense of what the brand should be, and they take it to the next level. And that's why you see the work you do for Crate. So I think I've spoken of a couple of contrasts here in terms of where the problem might lie with founders who are very clear and visionary about their product, their organization, and indeed their brand, but where it might fall with articulating the brand, and perhaps another founder who's equally clear in most of these aspects, but perhaps leaves the last mile to people who know, uh, who he thinks know better, right? And then just signs off on it, and having given them the freedom to do, the freedom and the budget, by the way, both, which is supremely important, to
Absolutely.
do what they're very good at. So I think you've got contrast, and perhaps Kunal is the biggest evangelist of brand advertising. Should be going over there and thanking him har bar penanchi also.
काफी सही. So I talk to a lot of people about what they think about, and we'll push aside the cred business model, but what they think about the cred marketing, and I'll ask you that question also. But just reflecting on what you're saying around founders, and there are many kinds, and it takes all kinds of
Mhm.
founders to kind of build these kind of brands. And maybe at the other end of the spectrum, there'll also be a kind of founder who will maybe be a pseudo CMO in himself or herself, and probably think of
Sure.
the CMO as an executor. And
Mhm.
so many times there's a lot of expectation mismatch, and many times Apple ban ke dikhao, and Tesla ko
Mhm.
dekho, and all of those conversations which basically mean nothing, right? So how do you think about those?
I mean, Nike, Apple, Tesla, and there's a few, two, three other brands will pop up in most conversations with most founders. Let's face it, right? Um, as I said, I think it's super, super important to have. Here's the process we followed at least, which was successful. Let me not second guess what someone else should do. I think Ritesh, like I said, is supremely mature, right? But what we found with Ritesh was it's best to align with Ritesh at an early stage with regards to what we want to achieve, right? So a brief, as it were, or a brief that Ritesh understands, not a brief in the advertising sense of the word, where a document is made ready. Sir, ये brief है, आप ठीक हो इस brief के साथ. No, no, no. Chat with him,
Yeah.
put together, and Ritesh will give you hardcore business metrics that we are chasing. If you're not aligned on those, thereafter, don't even bother coming back with, sir, ये हमने film लिखी है, ये हमारा campaign है, or this is what our intent is. It's all cock. You'll get brushed aside, right? So
Mm.
first align with Ritesh, or as we did on our metrics that we need to chase, and thereafter broadly align with him on the direction we are going in. Is this going to be about product? Is this going to be about whatever is service, etc., etc., right? What are we chasing? Are we chasing new customer acquisition? Are we consolidating with the old ones? What are we doing here? Do we want to appear XYZ, new, fresh? Is there something new we are doing? Just at a very, very fundamental level, align with him on that. Once you do that, you will find that thereafter you will get the space to go and do what you need to do in terms of marketing strategy and communication. And even within that, if you can find checkpoints where you meet and discuss them, you'll find you ultimately have the freedom to go and create the campaign that the brand needs, as opposed to the campaign that the founder has preconceived in his or her head. So I believe if you follow this process, it creates room at the end for you to do what you're best at.
But I'm sure even after following the process, there might be an odd founder out there who would come back and say, "Arey, maza nahi aaya." Now, what do you do? Like, other than, of course, you're like plummeting that, like you're pummeling that guy with punches in your head. But what do you say in that kind of a meeting?
Not really. I think with what you do again is get them into the room, get them into the kitchen. Sometimes Uh, people like Ritesh give you a lot of room to do what you want. But in key projects, it's just best to say, sir, why don't you come in here? Please give us time. I know you have very little time, so we won't take much. But here's the agency coming in. Here's the agencies we are reaching out to. We get the best agencies in the country. They'll come and present their thoughts very quickly to you. If you don't have a time for that, also, we'll send you a deck. Please have a look at it. Make sure, with the help of his EA, make best friends with EAs. Very, very, very useful that he sees it and get a reaction from him. And if he says "Maza nahi aaya," after that, get a sense of what he's doing, which we did, by the way, with the work we would do. And that's why we had such a robust creative team also within at OYO. And then do it yourself. Because to be honest, you just can. Sometimes people need to see an outside perspective, show it to them, understand what the reaction is, go ahead and then knock it off yourself because you've understood it better. So I think we try to keep it flexible. Uh, Bigger projects, get them into the kitchen. At other times, show them how valuable brand can be. and how a good brand can be by actually making a lot out of smaller projects. So they start to rely on you, right? Smaller projects which are low budgets on it. People tend to say, there's no scope in it. But to be honest, that's where you actually can earn your chops and, display what you're really good at. Uh, don't discount them. Make the most of them. Some of our best work happened at OYO on stuff we had zero budget on, and everyone just sat up in the organization and noticed and said, "Wow, how they did that? How they do that?" You know, uh, put in a cadence in place where you chase leadership to share your work, to showcase why it's good, and then say, "Hey, why don't you share it, please?" Because when someone shares it, they half own it, and they see it. Because a lot of the time people who are heading product or revenue or whatever have no time to see any of the shit, right? So make sure people
That's true.
recognize it, make sure the world recognize it. Sometimes you need external validation. And that's why you saw a lot of what we did was backed up by, an FEs or a WARC or a JSHAT, right? Not necessarily just the creative awards, but otherwise. And make sure they sit up and take note of you so that when the time comes for the kind of project that I described in detail, you have a lot more faith that you earned, whether the person had faith in the whole thing or had a preconceived notion of what it should be or not. So it's not one answer, unfortunately. I thought it would be one answer when I went in, and that was my frustration. But I learned over a period of time that you have to do many things for you to be able to do that one big thing right, and get earn some faith on along the
Very cool. So I'm picking up two things from here. Number one, be best friends with EAs, and
way. Absolutely.
the second is that make a person share
Yeah.
it, because when they share it, they half own it. That's quite cool.
We had
Uh,
a system in place to do that. We didn't just do it by chance. We literally had a person assigned. A lot of the times, the leaders would have no time for this shit, would not even ever post. And you can create most virality for anyone, any out of all platforms where you can create most virality is Twitter and LinkedIn, right? You share something, someone likes it, all the followers see it, right? They would just give us the creds to their handles, and we'd post it. We literally had a system in place for every campaign to do that.
Very cool, very cool. Tell me about like when you came into and you came into OYO with the brand mandate. Tell me about the first interaction you had with Ritesh, and tell me a very unfiltered version of it. That what were you thinking in your head? That was this kid up to? What do I tell him? Just take me through that.
Yeah, look, you think of Ritesh as young, but the moment he starts speaking, you realize you're speaking to someone older than you for some strange reason. And it's not just me. I
Hmm.
recall, just a few months before me, a gentleman called Aditya Ghosh had joined OYO as the CEO. And he put it well when, and I quote his words when I say that Ritesh has the mind of a 40-year-old in the body of at the time when I joined, I think he was 25 or, something like that. So he just doesn't come across. That's my your first impression of him is this guy is older than I thought he should be, you know,
Hmm.
or
In a
someone
good way.
who's in a good way. He sounds extremely mature. Equally, I think the other context of me meeting him, and I actually met Mandy, who was our CSO. Mandy is famous in investing circles, ex McKinsey, super sharp. Again, such a brilliant mind. Love him to bits. Can learn so much from him. So Mandy got me in alongside a lady at the time who was Polish lady based in out of London who was heading brand globally for her. And a week into me coming in, she was gone, and the mandate landed with me. And Ritesh met me, and he sort of told me about what I needed to set right, perhaps. And he was very clear about what I needed to do. And one of the things he quoted was, I think, working alongside other functions and being respectful. I think I literally remember these two things and the fact that he was far more mature than I thought he should be. And I think it took me a while to do that. Took me about 6 to 9 months to really do or understand what he really meant. But I think when I started, about an year into my stint, I'd say, just before COVID struck us, right? And equally, once COVID struck us, we had no choice but to work a lot more together. Once I started to do that, I was about 10x more successful at OYO than when I first entered and I said, I'll do some cool work. the moment I lost
Very cool.
all of that and I erased that from my mind, and I'd say, you know what, I'm going to sit in revenue meetings. I want to sit in growth meetings. I want to sit in, operational meetings, and I'm going to listen. And I know nothing about what these folks are saying, but I'm going to learn everything about it. It made me so much more successful at whatever I did thereafter.
Very cool. And I think so. Does that help you earn trust with those teams, other than, of course, informing your worldview on what the brand is doing? Like, and it's not only the communication that people see; it's also the experience, pretty much everything. So how did that kind of round out your worldview on the brand OYO?
Yeah, yeah. I think you earn trust because look, let's face it. As here's the truth about people who've been on in the agency business, as I call it, right? We learn a lot of different things, as I started by saying, from a lot of different people and a lot of different organizations, right? Uh, we like to think of ourselves as jacks of all trades, so to speak, right? But we know a lot, right? That's why, and the one thing we're very, very good at is reading a room. We're very good at reading people. We're very good at reading situations. We're very, very good at understanding problems. Over time, when you spend time in the business, you get very good at doing all of this. I think this might well be true for marketing people who've spent time with different types of people and different types of organizations as well, right? So when you're in a room and you're hearing everything starting from tech and what's possible with product, right? What's possible with operations, what's possible with just tweaking certain things on the app and extracting more revenue just by prioritizing something visually, right? I mean, the amount of inputs your brain is getting are insane. This is all the stuff that you want to do when you're in the business, right, of communication, but never
Yeah,
actually get to do, right?
yeah, yeah.
How can I get someone to prepay on a brand that people prefer to post pay or COD, pay in cash, right? By simply making sure that the prepay button has more aesthetic priority, by rewarding them with a certain percentage off if they choose that, etc., etc. Right? It's pretty basic. It's 101 stuff. But this is what people live and breathe. People who manage product growth revenue in an organization like every day, right? They're doing this all day, every day, right? And when you get into that and say, you know what, I can apply my aesthetic sensibility to it, or I can find solutions like, hey, it's COVID. No one's going to pick a budget hotel brand. Let's face it, they have hygiene issues with us anyway. At $600 a room, no one trusts you. There's no point saying you sanitize. The Bagal ki Nike dukan is also saying sanitize, and no one believes that, right? So the thing to do is, can we just work with operations, tech, and all other functions and declare ourselves as sanitized before your eyes? And really, while it's simple to say that, what you have to do is then also enable a hotelier who's not willing to spend panch paisa on staff to get a spray, right? So then you apply your brand thinking, say, oh hey, you know what? I know someone in Levers. We can do a global alliance with Levers and say let's ally with Lifebuoy and their other brands, right? Get sprays at a knockdown price to 100 hotels, right? All the person needs to do during check-in is just walk to the door, spray 30 checkpoints in front of the customer, and the thing is sanitized before your eyes. The customer becomes your auditor, right?
Mm. Very
Uh,
cool.
your ratings are going to be higher because no one can dispute the fact that it was sanitized,
Yeah.
right? The hotels which choose to do this because it's a franchise operation, remember, they don't have to do this. But if you do it in 100 hotels and you show that their ratings are higher, their revenue is greater because of more check-ins, because of more people choosing this option, then very, very soon, the rest of the at the time 8,000 hotels in the country will opt for it, which is exactly what happened, right? For this, you need to work with tech, you need to work with ops, you need to work with about 13 functions to take it live, and you need Ritesh's blessing for all of
True.
it to happen in about 13, 14 days, which is exactly what's
Yeah.
possible in a startup. So you understand that you can, and this is an idea that came, from us, and then everyone else made possible. Uh, it's incredible what's possible when you get in there and get under the hood alongside people. I don't think you need to earn respect thereafter. You just become part of the team. And I think that is the
Yeah.
difference between how it was when I first came in and how it was in year two.
Very interesting, and I love that story. But just tell me about, like, how do you take this brand, which is $600 a night, hotel room, largely franchise operated, and so from a control perspective of the experience, it's not in the ideal state. Like, there's a lot of factors
Yeah,
which are up in the air, and then the end state becomes this brand communications team, which is probably which has one of the most awarded work in modern times. Like, how do you take that journey from there to there? Because it's very easy to set back and say कि यार इतनी चीजें मेरे हाथ में नहीं है, क्या करूंगा, ये मास प्रीमियम है, ये है, like you can just label it very easily. But
yeah.
from there, just to make it a brand that's as awarded and respected in the community, in the marketing and advertising community, as any other in modern times. So how did that journey happen, and what were you thinking?
Again, I think working with, first of all, I'd go back to working with the right strat people. I worked with Bassi, who I knew from Ogilvy, and later I worked with Jitu, who I mentioned also, right? Um, and I think that perhaps helped us understand. We had a lot of understanding of the brand first up from the people who were already there. I inherited a damn good team. I inherited someone called Anushka, I remember, who used to speak to, she had 2 hour sessions called Infernos. They had a brand name for it, where she just used to chat to customers without necessarily having a questionnaire, right? Who are you? Why are you going to the hotel? Not just customers in big cities, but everywhere, right? And Anushka had some 30, 40, 50 just stories to tell me about who these people were who were using these brands, right? The the hotels that they were going to. And you come in with a preconceived notion that, oh, okay, this is a hookup pad. Obviously, couples use it, or at best, some sales folks will use it, who are traveling around, etc., etc., etc. That is true. That is a large percentage of who uses it, right? What was unknown to us, and even OYO didn't know this, right? Otherwise, they'd be doing a lot more with it. Were stories like, data tells you that, whatever, on a good day, 55% of the bookings, 60% of the bookings might be couples, right? But in a small town, we discovered more than one couple who were checking in to fight, right? They weren't just telling us
What do
that.
you
They didn't
mean?
have to tell us. Married couples, right? लड़ाई करने के लिए चेक इन कर रहे थे क्योंकि कहाँ पे करेंगे दे
Same,
लिव इन अ
same.
स्मॉल हाउस राइट पूरे घर में मतलब 6 लोग हैं तो वहां पे कोई क्या ही लड़ाई करेगा राइट और बाहर बाहर जाके भी क्या करना सो वी मेट पीपल हु वर एक्चुअली चेकिंग
Are
इन टू
you
फाइट
sure? Are you sure
या
it?
या
मतलब, they
या
said
या
ladai and they didn't say something else.
they're like married, they don't need to check into a hotel to do anything else, right? They've already produced kids
Who
to,
knows?
in
Like,
their homes.
Bombay has small houses and space
Of
constraints,
course,
so
of
who
course.
knows? But yeah,
So
that's quite interesting. So people checking in to
exactly.
fight in a hotel room. So yeah, how did
Yeah,
you
I
use
mean,
that?
yeah, so that was one. We realized that people were checking into just to like to work, right? Because again, small houses or even if you think co-working and all, that's a lot more expensive than checking into a hotel room. At like at a good on a good day, you'll get it for $400, $600 क्या चीज़ है, right? 399 पे भी मिलता है, 299 पे भी मिलता है, you know.
Wow.
So, I mean, if you run the math, honestly, it's a downside like less expensive than the cheapest co-working place, right? People were going there to study, and why? Because आपका घर यहाँ पे है. If you're sitting
Hmm.
wherever you're sitting, chances are there's an OYO pretty near where you are right now. Okay.
Hmm.
तो पेरेंट्स वुड से अच्छा यार यहाँ पे तो पढ़ाई हो नहीं सकती बोर्ड के एग्जाम आ रहे हैं तो वहां पे पढ़ ले ठीक है खाना वाना पहुंचा देंगे तेरे को कोई टेंशन करने की जरूरत नहीं
क्या
है
बात है यार। मतलब लोग
राइट
घर पे बोल के जा रहे हैं कि मैं ओयो पढ़ने जा रहा हूँ, बट वो एक्चुअली पढ़ने जा रहा
ऐसा भी हो सकता है and to be honest
है।
I'm talking young kids I'm not even talking like older kids who can be accused of using this as an excuse right so
क्या
and
बात
this is
है।
all real stories okay not none of these are like fabricated ones this is stuff where Anushka has just gone spoken to them at length etc etc of course you got the unmarried couples who tend to be our best customers come quietly go quietly no fuss keep coming back to the same hotel over and over again same room god damn it वो एक और अलग कोहॉर्ट है उसकी कहानी एकदम अलग है but once we realized this we sort of sat down with the strat team and said okay what's going on here why are people doing this right okay we know that proximity is our strength there are like whatever x number of OYOs every square kilometer in this country right it's crazy how many OYOs there are right at the time I remember 10,000 से ऊपर थे right
Wow.
you know that it's value for money right you know that India में space की कमी है right if you join these dots together what it tells you is that the untapped potential of this is currently we are selling hotel rooms, okay, which are mainly, as I said, perceptually hookup pads, also to the detriment of the brand in general, right? But actually, the potential here is that look at the amount of real estate space we have at next to no cost for people to use right next door to them. Yeah, our worst performing hotels are actually the ones which are in neighborhoods. There's so many people who say, "Oh, ghar ko OYO bana do," right?
Mm.
You'll find an OYO in Gurgaon neighborhoods, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
But how do you drive people to go and go over there, right? Because they
Mm.
happen to be next to nothing, right? It's not next to a tourist destination. It's not next to a business destination. It's not next to a railway station, airport, nothing, right? So in net, what you have in hand is space and at a very low cost. And net, what India does not have is space and it doesn't have a lot of money. India at large, right? If you join those dots together, you say, no, stop selling hotel rooms. Sell India's space that it doesn't have. That was our
Very true.
first big realization with this brand. And
Mm.
when we put out this campaign, we worked with, I remember the script room. I'd been dying to work with Ram Sam. I loved Ram Sam's work when he was leading Low Bangalore. It was awesome. So I again hooked up with that gang and they came with their own stories.
Mm.
I mean, I remember Apan, the producer at the time, telling us that, you know what, we were in Gujarat, great roads, driving from one place to another, had to make a pit stop in the night, hadn't booked before, middle of nowhere, just looked up this app, found a hotel for like 800 bucks, spent the night, no fuss, clean, and so on. And we were on our way. And that became one of the films we shot with two bikers who were stuck in the rain. And one of the fools hadn't looked up the weather app before leaving. So put out 11 films, I remember, for, you know, a period of a year or two, 12 films actually, right? Which spoke about this exact thing of with the intent of transforming this brand from being a hotel room app to an app that gave you access to space. And I think that was one of the biggest wins that we had across the globe with that particular campaign. So I think on one hand, I would say, you know, something like a sanitize before your eyes, or in the next year we did vaccinate, again a similar project where you got into the innards of the organization, right? And managed to do something by understanding all the possibilities and working with all the stakeholders together. On the other hand, having an outside in perspective backed by consumer conversations gave you a large bird's eye view of what is possible with a brand, and a brand as massive in its intellectual scope, as I like to say, think of it as this one.
But why not? Why not do more on owning the hookup ad positioning? That association is already
Excellent
there.
question. I love that question. I love when people ask me that question because there's a very simple answer to it. Um, I've never come across a brand like this brand. You know, you go to YouTube, you go to any of the social media channels, you look up OYO, you'll instantly have an avalanche of videos, memes, jokes, etc., etc., etc. for them, for the brand, right? I don't have to do anything. All of them are building the couple brand for me already, right? Why the hell should I fuel a fire which is largely seen as negative by society anyway, right? I mean, I can't even counter the amount of content being generated, right? Like per hour, the amount of content generated on behalf of this brand, most of it is X-rated content, is overwhelming, right? And that's doing its job of building the couple brand on its own. You got to do nothing. You can just sit by and like just watch it fly by, you know, and it'll keep happening. So we never had to focus on it. That's the other part. We decided very early that इसके लिए हमें कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है. It also comes from having a certain monopoly in the space because there is no
Mhm.
competitor if you really think about it, right?
By
So
far,
that is
yeah.
an advantage here. So you don't have to spend money and time on doing that. That is already being doubled down by performance marketing. Let's face it, right? It's already been doubled down by pop culture for you. So between those two, it's sorted. And on a good day, like I said, you already have 60% bookings coming from there. To be honest, the brand will die if you just focus on one cohort anyway. It's better off for the brand to focus on all the other possibilities, वहाँ पे 5-10% भी बढ़ गया तो वारे न्यारे हैं, because all the other people who come will be less value focused than this cohort in any case. So all of those decisions, I think, were very helpful for us, including stuff like, I remember Mandy did a tie-up with HT, right? It was the shares for space deal. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do with this, right? TOI hota to unke actually thode और mediums हैं who I can reach my customers with, my core customers. But with HT,
Yeah.
newspaper, and not much else, what do we do? So we literally decided to make HT front page an image and perception building channel for us amongst people who matter. Ultimately, it's also a brand that needs to list, right? And forming
Absolutely.
opinions amongst a very different community is super important for them. So we decided कि यहाँ पे हमें कुछ बेचो काम करना ही नहीं है. यहाँ पे हमें सिर्फ
Hmm.
opinions बनाने हैं. So again, we
Hmm.
set ourselves free from some tasks and gave ourselves
Hmm.
other tasks, which allowed for us to focus and do what we finally did.
But they would have been the temptation, right? They would have been the temptation to put out some work which kind of just plays on that. Assuming वो autopilot पे है तो है, but कुछ उसमें खुजली तो आया होगा, right? कि इस पे कुछ करना है, maybe to own it or do something. I'm sure that
Sure.
conversation would have been there.
Yeah, sure. And it happened. It's just that no one ever saw it or needed to see it other than the folks who needed to see it. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it was again, it could be done in a manner that it could be. I mean, you can target all of these folks. They're on your app already, right? That, and as the Google calls it, a like audience is something, some people you can target very very specifically. And as I said,
Yeah.
you're already doing it day in day out, right? Even
Hmm.
with brand work, a lot of the times we would just put a performance layer on our, or even on our films, right? And let performance marketing run it. So
What do you
did
mean
we
by
do
that?
work for that cohort? So yeah, I mean, you can use stuff like Google Ace and all, and make sure
Hmm.
that you actually run films rather than the same old shitty stamp size creatives that performance marketing seems to thrive on, right? And put a performance layer on your brand work. It'll elevate both your performance work and make sure your brand work is very well targeted. Don't just think that you need to put it out on the YouTube masthead when you're running a film campaign. It is
Hmm.
possible to make the same cohort who's seen your film once see your other two or three films if you have multiple films in a campaign, right? And target them very specifically. So, as I said, yes, we did work for a cohort, but no, we perhaps never use mass media to distribute that work. It's not necessary. We had very very good tools to be very specific in reaching out.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And I like the fact that you talked about like a lot of your films having performance marketing layer, right? Because a lot of people tend to see them as silos, and I think there's been enough conversation on brand marketing being dead and performance marketing being dead,
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
on and so
waste of
forth.
time.
And
Yeah.
I think that's not a, like as recent as I just recorded with another guest, and he was saying, "कि अभी 2022 maybe there was a conference in which one of the topics was digital is the new disruptor." He's like, "वो conversation भी चल रहा है अभी." So we leave that, but how do you think of uh, kind of performance marketing, kind of just taking the same conversation out there, because the medium from a intent perspective and from a output perspective is supposed to do complementary things but in a very very different way. So how does that kind of border start diffusing, and how do you bridge that gap
Yeah,
necessarily?
look, I think again at a very human level work, if you have performance people, right? They invariably come with a lot of science and data, which is again, like I said, it makes your targeting very, very specific. It actually helps you with budgets and so on, right? Um, Listen to them, number one. They know their shit. Equally, help them understand that you can do what in quotes is it's all brand work, number one. There is no line between performance marketing work and brand work. The consumer
Absolutely
doesn't
agree.
draw a line between oh ये Google ने target किया है और oh ये
Mhm.
मैंने YouTube पे देखा है. It's all paid for and it's all targeted. Let's face it, right?
Agree. Yeah.
So we've actually gone ahead and said, you know what? One of the advantages we had at OYO was that I had a great partner on the growth side, and I would say, okay, you know what? Allow me to begin with to run better creative on performance, and we can do an A/B test. It takes nothing to do it. We can do multiple A/B tests to see which one performs better. आपको लगता है एक बहुत सेलू सा बड़ा सा स्लग लगा के अगर ज्यादा सीटीआर हो रहा है तो वो कर लेंगे बाद में, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
do it. And what we found was, honestly, sure, we learned from what we did and the mistakes we made, but we found that really there is no difference in CTR between A and B, right? There are some other things that work. If you're targeting couples and you're putting some random aesthetic thing, it's not going to work. But there are ways to show to be very very specific to couples and appeal to them with what they like. You know, I mean,
mm,
showing a bathtub is better than showing a some tourist destination, for example, is a no-brainer, right?
mm. True, true, true.
So those things you learn about what you need to have as content, but everyone learns that, hey, you know what? I can be, again, in quotes, more brand over here, and I don't need to be more, in quotes, performance over here, right? I've done the same over here as well. Work with someone who came in and say, hey, boss, we need to have delectable food shots, otherwise it doesn't work. Bro, you want to try it? Here you go. Take two creatives, give it a bash, and tell me what happens. He himself came back to me and said, sir, there is no distinct, difference between performance of either. So I think
Mm,
being open on both sides helps. At a
mm,
human level, make friends and learn from people who run performance marketing. They know their shit. I think they'll learn
mm,
to realize that you perhaps know your shit at a strategic level as well.
mm,
If you're able to work together, that's A. And
mm,
B, as I said, don't be scared to have a performance layer put on strategic brand creatives, because it's only going to help you budget wise. And when you start managing budgets yourself, you totally realize the value of it. I mean, a lot of our work today it focuses on the aggregator ecosystem, right? A lot of our business sits between Swiggy and Zomato, and that is the equivalent of doing performance for us. And we can actually achieve a lot by not spending like tons of money if we get it right on that ecosystem, because captive audience in the mood to grab a bite. I mean, geez, you're not going to get better conditions to play with, right? As opposed to a
yeah.
wide open Google where people are in the mood for many things. Sure, you can target them basis intent, etc., etc., search and
Mm,
all that. But this is as specific as it gets, and if you get it right over here, there's a lot to be gained. So I think I leave myself open to what works in an ecosystem, a platform, or with a tool. But equally, I always request people to be open to experiment with the kind of communication that is more suited to brand. And I think you find some great brands today around you also do that. You'll find that an Airbnb will never lose its tonality, right? On
absolutely.
the food aggregator side, Zomato has showed us all that you can actually build a brand just on social media and CRM. So yeah, it's doable as long as you're open to play.
Very cool. So, tell me an Indian brand, like just changing gears here, like an Indian
Mhm.
brand who's like putting out absolutely stellar work, like something you really admire, something recent, something any space.
Who's putting out great work these days over and over again? I think Cadbury is over a period of time. I mean,
Hmm.
at least until Anil Viswanathan was around. I think he's moved on to Vietnam, if I'm not wrong. Uh,
Yeah.
I've observed him from a distance and really liked how he's marshalling that brand across all brands. Um, they've done a great job. Um, in earlier times, I loved how Low built out the paperboard brand.
Hmm.
Don't see much
So
of it anymore,
love
but a
that.
beautifully built out brand. Tanish again
Hmm.
in earlier times. Right now, it's okay. Um, yeah, these two brands spring to mind. I think, like I said, um, I have nothing to say about the Crate product. I'm not a user myself. I downloaded the app, but I don't much use it. But
Hmm.
I think what they've done in general for communication and to show how brand building can actually lead to valuation building is, again, as I said, the marketing and advertising community should be thanking them for that, because they've shown the world what's possible just by building a great brand.
Hmm.
And I'm
So
sure they're
true.
doing good work on product as well. So I think of these three sort of pop up in mind for different reasons. I don't necessarily think Red is the best of the best amongst them, but yeah, they've caught attention for sure.
Very interesting. I think that's a good perspective of using marketing and the comms that you put out. as a way to bridge the valuation gap, or at least to
Yeah, yeah.
extend that conversation. I don't think many people look at it like that, but very interesting perspective. Uh, so your team at OYO, and probably even earlier in your work in advertising, you a lot of that work has been award winning. And when I say award winning, I mean genuine award winning. But there's also this like big long tail of Indian advertising marketing awards. Is like the biggest scam in the industry. कि this is आप nomination file करो, pay us X number of rupees, and like how does that? And I'm sure there are 10 of those in your mailbox this
Yeah.
week. So how do you think about those, and like how do you take the cringe out and stuff?
Yeah, everyone needs to do something I mean, everyone's got a P&L, I guess, and no
Yeah.
one minds adding a little more revenue to what they're doing. So I understand why publications need to do it, right? Some of them are friends, and I even support them. Would sometimes we even just participated in it just to get them going. But I think 2 or 3 years down the line, we just or in the past few years, we just sort of drew a line and said, here's the only awards we will enter, and you this is my view. It needn't be like uh, the only view, but number one, we will enter FEs. We will enter FEs because all marketeers and indeed agencies A, participate in it, and B, value it.
Agree.
And without bias, everyone's part of it, part of the jury, part of competing, etc., etc. So if we enter no other award in the land, we will enter FEs. Outside of FEs, uh, till last year at least, the only creative awards that we would enter is Curious, because again,
Yeah.
pretty much everyone entered it without bias, and the quality of jury usually is very, very good. I would go as far as to say that if you are a design agency and so on, then the Curious Design Award jury is perhaps even better than the Curious Communication Award jury, and the judging
Hmm.
is even more stringent. Stringent. I've seen it. I've been part of it. If you
Hmm.
get a Curious Design Award, you really do deserve it. So I think these are the three, and I've combined creative for a reason because a lot of people will be thinking about that. At
Yeah.
least these are the three Indian awards we were part of. I know Abby's made a huge push to be relevant, etc., etc. But I don't see all agencies yet participating in it. Hopefully, it improves, and then you might have a choice to make between Curious and Abby's. I wouldn't do
Hmm.
both. I don't think it's worth it. Outside of these international awards, the only ones we focused on were, again, like I said, work. Work is judged by marketeers,
Yeah.
and that's who you really want to see your work and or whatever, recognize it if it's any good. And finally, I'm big on Strat myself, as I said.
Hmm.
And as such, JSHAT is the best Strat award in the world.
Yeah.
And some hardcore strategists and marketeers are judging it. That's the other one I would judge. Work is now merged with the can effectiveness line. So
Hmm.
again, yeah, I mean, work, if you enter work or slash can effectiveness, they're sort of the same. So those I would enter. And if you're particularly blessed with a big budget, then knock yourself out and enter can or whatever else you want. We never were, and we never looked at it, to be honest.
Interesting. So while we just wrap this up, I want to like go back to Shock Badi Cheese hai, right? And I want to say how that's become like such a big part of culture, pop culture, right? And that's something which just slips out of the tongue whenever there's a context. So taking that into say a Subway or a Lavazza, so how do you think? What's the pop culture moment for Subway, and how are you thinking of building that roadmap in the coming couple of years?
Yeah, I think Lavazza is an easy answer to give. It's a very controlled brand. It's an Italian brand. Finding space for it in a subway by itself will create some amount of, let's call it, product virality, news, etc. Right? Suddenly you have a big coffee menu and a serious one within a subway, and that automatically adds traffic to you, gives people more reasons to come. So no brainer. Try and do it as fast as possible. Fill out your uh, drinks and dessert strategy. You're weak on both. I mean, sure, you got cookies, which people love, but that's not enough. So that's at product level a solve. We're at it. We'll do it. Simply a matter of time, right? Not easy, but we're doing it. Subway is, again, it's the most interesting QSR brand. And I've worked on more than one QSR brand over my time, of course, right? It's, as I call it, a QSR outlier. Subway is the most different QSR brand to all that I've encountered, at least, right? Um, it asks you a series of questions when you arrive at the counter. Um the questions involve stuff like bread, vegetables, sauces, and when I'm saying all of this, I'm saying let's think outside of who we are. We perhaps grew up around stores which had the smell of fresh bread, cookies being baked, etc. Right? Or even our kids, or people like us, etc., etc., who sort of seen this growing up. Let's think about people who've never encountered a brand like this. People who've simply been able to go to a, and think any QSR brand. I want a bucket of chicken. I want I want that zinger burger, right? I want whatever वो भी आपका जो भी 39 रुपए का मेन्यू है वो दे दीजिए कुछ आलू टिक्की टाइप, right? We have all sorts of people around us. Even the most arrived around us doesn't necessarily want to always go to a store and make their food, so to speak. You go to the best restaurants you possibly
Yeah.
can because the chef is great. He's going to make, or he or she is going to put together something banging for you, and you'll read about it in the menu and say, that sounds sexy, I'm going to get that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's why you go out, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, either you're making it yourself or someone's helping you with food at home, and you say, "Aaj kya khaoge?" And you say, "Please don't ask me. Just make what's in the fridge." Or you're very into it and say, "Aaj ye banao," right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So there are different types of people around us, and our background socially or whatever, income wise, is not necessarily what I'm referring to as. I just said the all types of people around us, and there are all types of options for them. A lot of things have been made sexy over time also, right? The burger is a sexy thing today. Then pop culture has made it sexy, and then marketing has amped upon that. Biryani, similarly, marketing started, culture started owning it, and now everyone was like, "Okay, let's have biryani," and so many other things like that. So you enter a food court, 10 options in front of you, and most of them are easy options. A lot of them are value options. We're very value conscious of the country. Here comes a brand which has been around for 22 years. Everyone knows it, right? Everyone knows how to go about it. Not everyone will choose it for the reasons I mentioned, right? So as such, a loyal base is really loyal. They don't even look at the menu when they come to the store. They know exactly where to head. There's a non-veg counter. There's a veg counter. They don't even look at anyone. They look down and they say, I want that, 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 that. There are people who say, don't place olives on this side, only place over here, place 6, don't place 8, etc., etc., etc. We get lower ratings on aggregators because everything is customized, right? And sometimes the store gets it right, sometimes it doesn't, right? Across 800 stores and growing, it's really hard for every order to be precisely right, but people are that precise, right? So in general, this is the nature of the brand. So we brought, the Delhi culture in the States sort of traveled around the world, whereas we don't necessarily have a Delhi culture. We just sort of got to learn this brand as we observed it, etc. Right? So as I call it, it's the you know Rajkumar Rao brand, so to speak. Acting आती है, अच्छी acting करता है. I would see all of his movies, but हाँ सही है, right? But वो उसको बोला हाथ मत फैलाए, शाहरुख खान बनने की जरूरत नहीं है,
Hmm.
right?
Love that.
So, right? क्योंकि जो है वही रहे, you know.
Yeah.
So
जो
as
है
such, you
वो-
find a certain finiteness about this brand in terms of how much you see on a day-to-day basis. It spikes in terms of growth, right? Whereas when you look at some of the QSR brands around you, you realize that there's immense potential for growth in the QSR space. So that's our current reality. On the positive side, you realize that what the people who come over here, because of the type of people who can answer questions, know what they want, know how to combine flavors, textures, etc. Uh, they actually have a little more dispensable income. They're actually okay with paying a little bit more. And as such, you can always find a way to increase your average order value, right?
Yeah.
So those are the advantages over here. So what do you do about it, right? Now you have a captive user base, right, which you don't want to lose. But equally, there's this whole wide universe out there which you can capture, right? So this is your current reality, and what can you do about it to basically retain who you have and add a whole universe that is outside of this to it, right? And that's exactly what I've been fairly quiet over the last 6 months. I used to post regularly and stuff. I've had no time in my life to do anything other than just do exactly what they've got me in to do, which is to transform this brand.
Yeah.
and not just transform the brand, but also transform perhaps how we operate this brand. So here's what we are doing, and in 2 days or 3 days from now, everyone will see that we are actually let's call it launching 8 new products, right? We're calling them hot sellers, uh, but in actual fact, we've actually changed our entire menu, right? Which which is a remarkably complex thing to do. I realized. I remember I was at OYO and we were changing our the engine, so to speak, of our European operations, and they happen to be big revenue generating operations. You can't just shut them down and change the innards of it. So someone likened it to changing the engine of a spaceship while it's climbing. And this is very similar. It's like getting under the hood of a car while it's running, because
Yeah.
it's not like it's a dead brand. It still has, like I said, a fairly loyal base who keeps coming back. You have a certain amount of business which you keep doing, and it's serious business. Yeah, it's you're still like 7-8% of the QSR market. You don't want to like lose that. So to change everything around with also a franchise operation that you run while you also are opening your own stores and growing them, right? So it's a hugely dynamic space to be doing this. Like it's crazy. So we'll have a new menu. We'll have a menu in which people can just come point and ask for whatever they want, just like they do at any other QSR. So these 8 hot sellers are made by us. They're the best combinations that we discovered after asking all of our sandwich artists, after researching, after working on new recipes, etc., with chefs. And they're simple, they're easy, they're all going to be warm, right? The other legacy we carry is of a cold sandwich and salad brand. All of these are going to be warm. They're going to be baked fresh in the oven, right? And all you do is pick one point and get it. Nothing, no questions asked, no changes, nothing. Just like any other food brand. And whoever wants to come build their own sub, as always, can go carry on doing that, because that stuff remains totally unchanged, right? Some two, three things that don't move as much might be discontinued. Some two, three things that uh, have been brought new are in there to play with, and so on. So in essence, this brand starts now being a lot more accessible, and a lot of our growth with the new stores that we're opening, by the way, and we continue to open, right, are going to be not in metros, right? All of us realize that the scope of growth in this country is outside of the main metros, who might well be saturated.
Agree.
So new customers who find this whole Q&A format, and to be asked to make their own cold subs or salads intimidating or just putting off, don't need to worry about that. They can just come say, hey, you know what? I'll get a damn good product wherever I am. It'll be consistent because it's one recipe. Till now, all of our products were like, there's Harinder's product, there's Mayur's product, and so on. And if it's good, it's on you. If it's bad, it's on you, really. But if it's good on, it's on us, and it's bad, it's on us. And the process of selection really involves also elimination, right? You can experiment with a few more things. Otherwise, you'd come to Subway, have the same thing over and over again, right? And figure
Um,
out what you like.
mm,
It'll have the stuff that you like. You like paneer, there is something with paneer. You like chicken tikka, there's something with tikka, and so on and so forth. There are some new things like pesto, which you don't necessarily see in QSR brands, right? Which we also tossed in there for the more evolved amongst us, and so on. So yeah, it's a big change. It's never happened in a brand like Subway for the last 22 years that it's been around here, and it's super excited by what it can do for us in terms of unlocking growth for us and getting new customers. That's the holy grail.
Love that. I think as a consumer and also as a student of marketing, I really want to see how this plays out because this brand is the customization has literally been at the heart of this brand. And considering that we bring an element of standardization to this, like I have a few hypotheses in my head, but I really want to see how this. I'll stay tuned and I'll let you know what I think. So love
Yeah,
that. So while we wrap up, I just want you to just give like a couple of words of advice to say mid-level marketers and like how to cut through the bullshit, how to think about their careers or creative communication professionals, like many of whom do listen to this. Like, what are things you would say that hey, this is what I've learned and this is what to avoid?
I'd pretty much just say two things really. I'd say humble up. I think I've learned to be humble over the last uh, decade, so to speak. And the moment I've allowed myself to be humble, I think I've learned 10x of what I might have otherwise. A lot of times I say that if I stayed in the agency business, I may never have learned anything new. You know, But the moment I shifted and I started working with people who I immediately realized were way smarter than I am, uh, and decided to shut up and just listen rather than just talk and hear my own voice. I think I learned about way more in 4 years than I might have, or 4 or 5 years since, than I might have in the 20 years if I'd spent 20 years more in the business. That it's okay to just listen and learn,
Yeah.
and B, it really is okay to be collaborative. There's no other superpower in this world. You're not Batman. Be collaborative, because the power of collaboration, and again, it sounds like such a textbook word, but really, I don't really mean it like that. I mean it at a very human level. Make friends with people in other functions, understand what they're doing, talk to people on the ground, visit whatever you're selling, even if you're selling online, visit your customer, talk to your customer, observe them using your product or service or app or whatever. I think you learn way more by doing that. It's old fashioned, but do it. Collaborate with people, including your customers, and you'll be about 10 times more successful. Um, yeah, get off LinkedIn. Not going to learn anything on there.
Very cool. So love that. So on that note, Mayur, will wrap up. Thank you so much for being here, and
Cheers.
hopefully to have you again soon. Probably when we have a lot more subscribers. But thank you. Love talking with you this Saturday. Thanks, Mayur.
Thanks,
Have a
man.
great
Thanks so
weekend.
much for having me.